afternoon. I think that's how it works. Well, that was a tremendous presentation from Anne just a moment ago. Really, really articulate, right on point, and as a result, I have nothing to say. Well, since they paid for my airfare, I better get here today. And you know, I've always wanted to come here because I've always been fascinated by the name of the state. And I'm going to say it now. Indiana, right? Did I get it right, Indiana? Yeah? Yeah? Hello, Indiana. Oh, I've always wanted to say that. The thing is that my mother would always say Indiana, you know. And as you can tell from my accent, I'm actually from that quite obscure little island on the other side of the Atlantic that tries to avoid its obscurity. But you know, getting here is very interesting. I came on a plane last night, and this is sort of true story that as I was coming on the plane, there was someone else in line, and they had a dog with them, and I thought, well, that's interesting, and don't often see that. You know, sometimes you see them in a crate, but this was like a dog on a lead. So I get on the plane, and I sit down, and this dog's on the floor next to me. And I say to the guy, well, this is really very, very interesting. What are you doing with that dog? And he said, I'm going down actually to one of the army bases because this is an unusual dog. This is a bomb-sniffing dog. I said, well, that is unusual. How does he smell? And he said, terrible. Don't all laugh at once. It was an effort. But I was going to say all sorts of things today about YOLO and cupcakes and everything else, but they took all my slides away and they just truncated my slides. So not only did the pre-speaker preempt me, but now I have very few slides, so I'm going to try not to make it totally boring for you. But I'm going to try to today talk about three things. I'm going to try to talk about millennials. I'm going to talk about the impact that millennials are having on the workplace, how to lead millennial talent, and on being a millennial at work. And why do we actually even want to think about this today? We want to think about it today because a differentiated talent strategy is the single largest competitive advantage that any company will have. A differentiated talent strategy is the largest single advantage that any company will have. And those talent strategies need to be innovative. And that's what it's all about, being innovative and being more innovative than the competition, both locally and globally. Before I get into that, I'd just like to show you this picture. Can you have a look at this picture and tell me what you see? Sure, a number of you. How many of you have seen this before? A lot of you? A lot of you, right? So what do you see? What do you see, madam? A woman. What sort of woman? A young and beautiful woman? Are you millennial? Yeah, you're a millennial. Okay. So let's ask someone else. The gentleman over here, in the back row. In the back row. Gentleman I was sitting next to you. What do you see in this picture? The same thing. Are you, sir, a millennial? Not quite a millennial. You're exactly. So, first point. Are millennials actually different from anybody else? So when we talk about actually having a really great engagement strategy, is that different in essence from the other engagement strategies that we have to have for the businesses? Now, there is an argument that brains don't totally form until they're around 30 years of age. And I guess that with this generation, we won't know whether this generation is different from other generations until they are indeed a little bit older than they are now. But my point is that when you look at what's changing in the workplace is that we have people coming to that workplace who were formed in a very different environment to the environment of the generation that actually went before, and the generation that went before them. You know, I think that one of the things that is at the center of this generation is the way that their parents sort of nurtured them. This generation, this millennial generation, actually grew up, or many of them grew up, in the shadow of 9/11, and in the shadow of a set of economics that were very different from the economics that their parents went through. So here is a generation that is subject to a different economic picture, and different to very different in terms of the workplace that their parents actually faced. And in the workplace today, we've actually got 5 generations working together. It's not just millennials, it's how millennials are facing other people. So it's a very changeful place. We're also in a workplace where there is enormous demographic change, which is moving through as well. So managing this generational soup is really, really quite difficult. And the impact on the workplace is, of course, that everything becomes instant. Those management layers that we've all got used to and those ways of doing things are really becoming quite redundant. If you were living in Roman times and there was a battle that was going on in some distant place, it took years, perhaps, for the results of that battle to actually come back for you to find out what went on. Now, if you think about the United States, and you think about the Wells Fargo moving across the country in a stagecoach, news would get across as fast as that stagecoach could get across, until you had the invention of the telegraph, etc. Now we see something on the TV, and that Ebola that was out there is suddenly here. We're living in an instant world where everything is upon us. And this generation, this electronic generation that is at the core of all this, is riven by having to deal with that technology, and having to deal with the change of that technology, and having to deal with the changes in the workplace that we really haven't seen before. And so managers, in many ways, are having to manage through this, navigate this in a way which is relatively uncharted. And I've gone the wrong way here. We can go forward again. So it's relatively uncharted. So how do we bring some sense of connectivity between this new generation and the workplace? And I think we do it actually by managing the work experience, engaging people in a different kind of way. We need, if you like, to make sure that the employment brand is clear for people. We need to, if you like, Uber the employment experience. I don't know how many people have actually been to New York, or if you have Uber. Do you have your Uber in Indianapolis? You do have that, right? So what does Uber do? What does Uber do for you? It actually removes the sense of anxiety that you have relative to that transportation experience, right? Because you're someplace, you didn't know how you were going to get home, you pull your... So how can we do that? How can we remove that anxiety for people in the workplace about what's expected of them, about what their potential is in terms of their careers? And how can we do that for people who are actually outside the organization, who actually want to connect with us? This employment brand that we have needs to be clearly articulated. It needs to connect in a very clear way with the mission of the company, so that when people come in and buy that employment brand, they're personally aligned with the company. Companies really need to understand this stuff, because they need to understand what the human capital flows are in the company. Within all this oscillation that I've talked about, within all this enormous change which is going on, there needs to be a persistent sense of vision within the company, So the people processes can be aligned with it. Without that sense of there being a human capital flow, without the sense that you invest in people because they're the only sort of capital that actually appreciates, a company will not, I don't believe, actually survive. So how do you lead millennials? I was talking to someone about this the other day. And I think it's quite simple. I think you lead millennials with your arms open wide. You lead millennials with your arms open wide. What do I mean by that? People want to be embraced. People want to be touched. People want to be mentored. People want to feel that the company that they work for is a company that actually cares about them. They want to be touched by that process. And for a millennial, how should you be at work if you're a millennial? Let me just share a quick story with you. I want to tell you the story about a Harrods pork pie and a regular pork pie. Because in London, there's this very fancy place. It's a bit like the Nordstroms of food stores called Harrods. Anybody been there in London? Been there too? Yeah, a few people have been there, right? And if you go into Harrods and you ask for a pie to eat, what they'll do is get hold of that pie. They will say, yes, sir, how would you like that pie? And they'll get a silver server out and they'll put it on a plate and they will tie it together in greaseproof paper. And then with great ceremony, they'll hand it to you and they'll ask you 15 pounds English, which is like $22 or something, right? Which is a great, great experience, actually, but it costs you a lot of money. I contrast that with another store that I used to go to in New York. I can't name it because we're being filmed. That was very, very different. You go into this place, there's this kind of dumpster of pies. You go down, you're feeling pretty miserable. You pick out the pie. You look at it. You think, I've got to spend time with this pie. I may even have to eat the pie. I go back. I sit down on the bench. I eat the pie. I know it's full of cholesterol. And it's really not a very pleasant experience. So if you're a millennial, what sort of pie do you want to be? Do you want to be a pork pie? Or do you want to be a pie that nobody really wants? So how can you differentiate yourself? I've got a lot more to say about that, but I won't because my time is actually up. Even though there is no one there. Yes, he is here to ask me difficult questions. Thank you very much. We'll take more questions.
Have a seat, Craig.
Thank you. Other way?
Right.
Good. Sorry.
All right, so the first question that's burning is, can you say innovative again? All right. I had to ask it. These people vote on these questions,
I see.
You know?
Absolutely right.
All right, so if millennials have been brought up in this environment of constant change, what can we do to develop long-term employees, though?
Yeah, I think there's a very different thing which is going on at the moment. Millennials are actually looking for tours of duty. They're probably not going to be with you as long as employees have been with you in the past. But they're really with you to learn. They're really with you to get involved in a community, and they're really with you to get engaged in new technology, to have a sense of future, to have a sense of momentum, to have a sense that you are interested in them. If you can provide them with that, and then if you can provide them with a tour of duty that gives them an opportunity to jump from rock to rock, they're really going to like it.
Good. The next one is, do you think companies talk about employment brand during the hiring process?
When companies are in the hiring process, they are the employment brand.
Yeah.
So that experience that someone has from the time that they see you on the internet through to the time that they walk through the door is a huge experience. In fact, there's a lot of research to say that that relationship with your employees is actually much more valuable to the company than the investment you make externally in terms of the brand. Because eventually the employees become the representation of your brand in the marketplace. So a great thing to do is to go on to Glassdoor and have a look at your branding in the marketplace.
Good. So in that hiring process, everybody's competitive here for talent, whether it's technology, financial. How do you stand out differently, maybe?
You mean you mean individually? I think you get to this point of individual differentiation by being the Harrod's pie. By making sure, for instance, when you go along to the company, that you really do understand what that mission of the company is, and having thought through as to whether you personally are going to be aligned with the mission of the company, and whether this is really a place where you want to be and you want to give your passion and energy to.
Good. So this one says, would love some specific, what's an old school company that gets millennials right?
I would have to say that an old school company that gets millennials right is probably American Express.
Really? Why?
Yeah, because I think that if you look at it from front to back, they spend a lot of time Ubering the employment process, Ubering the employment experience.
Good.
So to get this right, you have to think in a systemic sense around what's my strategy and how do I align my talent acquisition process with that strategy. So you've got a series of reinforcing steps which are going on to motivate the employee and ensure that you're really getting them engaged.
How do you ensure that happens at a manager level? Because sometimes the leadership could be this is the culture, this is what we want to do, but it's not exercised for the direct supervisor if I'm a new millennial.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a tremendously important thing. The manager is the person that links each individual to the vision. If you think about organizations today, they're much less like structures than they are like neural networks. So the manager is like a synapse within that connects everything together for the employee. They're the person that creates the subculture or the microenvironment within which that employee will feel happy or not feel happy. And given what we know around how millennials are actually formed and how happiness is important to them, the role of the manager, as you say, is absolutely critical. So the way that the companies select them, the way that the companies direct them, the way that the companies engage them and they engage their employees is jugular.
Yeah. Do you think in this term with being a manager where it's this instant world, how do they keep up? I mean, how does a manager keep up with this generation when some of them are in there, they're brand new, it's an instantaneous thing?
Yeah. Well, I think you actually have to be in the moment. I think you have to be in the flow, and you have to understand that managing the relationship is now managing the work.
Good. All right, so this one is, what department should the responsibility for culture live? HR, marketing, other, a new department? Who drives it?
The responsibility of the culture is in the leadership of the company.
Good.
The leaders of the company are responsible for the ethical DNA. You can't sustain great products. You can't sustain integrity unless the leaders of the company are leading with integrity. And so the leaders of the company have to have the vision. The HR function can support that, but basically, if the leaders don't have that in the company, then the HR function is a dead parrot.
Great. Craig, thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Go ahead and
Thank you. Good.